Although Harriet Nelson was famous in the United States as the ideal TV mommy, she began performing in risky theaters at the little age of 6 weeks. Mobster eyes were fixed on her as she danced at the Cotton Club. At parties, she would tell crude jokes. From the age of 13, she enjoyed smoking in secret. Scandal and violence marred her first marriage. Cocktails in hand, she hugged the social outcasts and society rejects as the cameras stopped rolling. Despite her prominence as an advocate for traditional family values, the woman was harboring secrets that could have doomed her career. Everything is altered by her true story. Even though she couldn't yet support her own head, Harriet Nelson on the stage anyhow. In Des Moines, Iowa, Peggy Lou Snyder came into this world on July 18, 1909. Her stage debut was at the tender age of 6 weeks. She was born into a touring stock company, and her parents were actors there. They included their newborn daughter in the play. This was no casual stop for a quick selfie or family portrait. It was a genuine part in a genuine play. It was even mentioned in newspapers back then. It was one of the first known instances of a baby making their theatrical debut in the United States. I didn't only start out at a young age. Even before she could speak, Harriet was thrust into a world where the theater was her family's reality, and she spent her formative years in front of cameras. She began her stage career at the tender age of 3. While performing for her parents' stock company, she got her first acting gig. There was no amateurishness about these productions. The stock companies were unrelenting in their pace, producing new plays night after night with as little as 1 day of preparation. In the company of grown-ups, Harriet had to pick up new skills fast, adjust to new situations, and act like an expert. Nevertheless, she wasn't merely committing lines to memory. So far, she had held her own. A lot of people took note. She had lost her novelty. She had amazing stage presence. It didn't stop Harriet from going to school, though. St. Agnes Academy was a prestigious institution with rigorous academic requirements. Her schooling, however, was unconventional. She was firmly rooted in her studies throughout the school year. In her spare time, she would take to the road and perform. Her touring schedule was meticulously planned by her parents so that she could continue her schooling even during vacations. It required a lot of self-control to keep up with both reading and the theater. Her age can have been juggling 2 very different worlds at once, the one she lived in a classroom and the one she lived on stage. The year 1925 was a watershed moment. Her parents divorced when Harriet was 16 years old. As a whole, the family was shattered by the breakup. Because of this, she had to decide between her parents, between being stable and following her goals. It happened at the exact moment she was entering maturity and was a difficult, sad experience. On the other hand, Harriet didn't sit around and let fate decide. She forged ahead unafraid, leaning into her independence as she went her own way. She matured rapidly as a result of that setback. She was no longer only the offspring of performers. Suddenly, she was a star in her own right. She made yet another daring move in the final 3 months before graduating from high school. Before she could join the ballet company at the Capitol Theater, she withdrew. It was careless for the majority of teenagers. However, Harriet had clear desires. There was an air of seriousness in the Capitol Theater. There was a lot of competition to join the ballet corps. She was wise to forego her degree in favor of practical experience, and her move paid dividends. In addition to delving further into live performing, she obtained professional training. Despite the danger, it set the stage for her subsequent successes. A short time later, she was playing at the Cotton Club in Harlem, widely regarded as one of the city's liveliest and riskiest venues. In the 1920s, when the Cotton Club was at its most seedy, jazz was king. It catered exclusively white customers, while being located in Black Harlem. A number of jazz greats, including Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Cap Calloway, were black musicians. First, Harriet was fully immersed in the action. There was music, money, and Mobster every night she played. The club was controlled by regulars like Dutch Schultz and Lucky Luciano, who hung around in the shadows. It posed just as much of a threat as it did beauty to a young woman. Still, she showed no fear. Her understanding of the entertainment industry was enriched. In all its luminous splendor and shadowy recesses, Amidst the glitz and glitter, she also developed a habit that would plague her throughout her life. She began smoking cigarettes at the tender age of 13. Smoking was widely accepted and even celebrated in the entertainment industry during that time. It gave you an air of sophistication, edge, and age. However, the harm began at a young age. She would continue to have persistent lung troubles, difficulty breathing, and coughing spells for decades afterward. The fact that she was addicted wasn't incidental. It was a tragedy that lingered with her to the very end. As her fellow performers sought stardom, Harriet toiled away in vaudeville's shadows, honing her trade. She rose to prominence as the comic foil of comedy greats like Burt L. and Ken Murray. Even though she wasn't the one actually laughing, she was the one who set the scene. Timing like that isn't easy to come by. Having wild, exaggerated energy, Elle went on to play the timid lion in The Wizard of Oz. Harriet countered that with her composed and direct speech. The constant influence she exerted allowed their performances to gel. She kept on going from city to city, performing at concert after show. It was a tiring life in vaudeville, what with all the traveling and performing. Nonetheless, she persisted and her conditions steadily improved. The major breakthrough followed. For vaudeville artists, the Palace Theater in New York City was the pinnacle. By playing the Palace, you would have achieved success. There were 4 performances by Harriet in the 1930s. There were few opportunities for a second chance on that platform. You had it bad with the crowds. The bar was set very high. Nevertheless, Harriet was always successful. Her reputation began to rise. Some people took note of it. Audiences returned, casting agents took note. The opportunity to perform in the Palace ushered her into a new phase of her career. A vaudeville headliner, she had gone from a stock company toddler. When 21-year-old Harriet Nelson made the biggest, the greatest error of her youth. She wed comedian Roy Sedley in 1930. He was 9 years her senior, a master of slick talk, and an established member of New York's seedy nightlife. They crossed paths at the Cotton Club, a glitzy, dangerous, and musically charged nightclub. At first, it seemed like a dream, but as time went on, it became more real. Harriet was thrust into a world of anarchy by Sedley, who was aggressive and careless. Although she had a background in the entertainment industry, she was unprepared for the darker side of things that this represented. A difficult marriage wasn't the only kind. How heartless. The mental and verbal violence Harriet endured at his hands left her damaged, and he drank and partied even harder. His anger was short. He was friends with a gang of hard-living celebrities. In the midst of it all, a young woman named Harriet found herself trapped. As soon as the Cotton Club's dazzling lights went out, violence, intimidation, and isolation took their place. The life of Sedley was far from glamorous. That was risky. Even more so, Harriet was experiencing it on a nightly basis. He remained her legal guardian even after she had left him a year earlier. That also required 2 more excruciating years. In 1931, she had been cut off. However, Sedley continued to have control over her life. Sessions moved at a snail's pace and Sedley refused to cooperate. Despite being caught in a legal gray area, Harriet continued performing. Any job she could get, she took. From vaudeville performances to dance gigs to straight woman roles with comedians like Burt L. and Ken Murray, she had to keep a straight face. Center stage as they attend to a jumbled situation behind the scenes. Moving ahead was impossible for her. At this time, at long last, in 1933, the annulment arrived. On paper, everything was over, but the pain was still there. In that very year, a shift occurred. Harriet met saxophonist Harriet Nelson in 1932 while she was still technically married but emotionally free. Calm and intelligent, he was the antithesis of Roy. On and off stage, their chemistry was palpable. However, their relationship was contentious in the 1930s. The title of Mrs. Sedley remained with Harriet. Still, she was performing, smiling, and developing feelings for someone else. She was unconcerned about the rapid spread of rumors. AZ put her at ease. For his band, AZ recruited her to sing lead vocals. In an effort to put her troubled history in the past, she adopted the theatrical identity Harriet Hilliard. Background singers were the norm for most female vocalists in huge bands. She wasn't Harriet. She possessed charisma, vitality, and command. It didn't take long for her to become the talk of the town. Beyond singing, she did more. She delighted guests. She drew everyone in with her infectious smile as she teased the audience, joked with Aussie, and more. She had gone beyond a mere recuperation by 1933. She got to her feet. The Glen Island Casino booked them for a performance that summer. Everyone wanted to be there. Guests from the upper class, radio broadcasts that went nationwide, and affluent audiences. The stage was illuminated by Harriet and AZ. There was a constant stream of customers every night. Word about them was flying. The interplay between them, the melody, the backstory. Something clicked. This was no accident. In a bottle, it was like lightning. Something else caught AZ's eye about Harriet as well. He began penning humorous duets exclusively for her. Harriet got the punchlines in these cutting, cheeky tunes, rather than the usual soft love songs. On stage, she teased AZ during one of their most popular songs, among others. The crowd went wild. She had more to offer than a lovely voice. Her courage, wit, and daring shone through. Rare was it. The air was crisp. It held true. It was considered rude for women to respond in such a way in the 1930s. It was Harriet. She had an air of effortlessness. With no exceptions whatsoever. There was an air of anticipation as the music, laughter, new moniker, and sold-out concerts built towards a grand finale. Harriet wed AZ in 1935. Everything was different this time. Nothing was hidden, only two individuals who knew one another and shared common goals. Safe haven, loved ones, and a future founded on trust, not fear. Love was just one emotion in the marriage. There was consistency. It manifested itself as everything Harriet lacked in her relationship with Sedley. Their collaboration on radio projects began within a year. They had become well known by the late 1930s. They worked hard for their accomplishment. It took time and suffering to earn. Opportunity, risk, and retrying. Harriet Nelson inked a 1936 deal with RKO Radio Pictures for a duration of 1 year. Just off Broadway, she was 27 years old. In the club scene, and she was an experienced performer who had been playing the piano and violin since she was 3 years old. This agreement represented a major milestone. Katharine Hepburn and Fred Astaire were both huge stars at RKO, one of Hollywood's most prestigious studios. She was assured 3 films and the chance for more under the arrangement, all depending on her success. It was the first major break she had taken from playing with AZ Nelson's band. And she and AZ had both come to the consensus that now was her moment to shine independently. She also won a major role in the highly anticipated RKO picture Follow the Fleet that year. Not just any musical, though. In it, the legendary Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers were featured. Alongside Randolph Scott, Harriet portrayed the romantic protagonist, Connie Martin. The film grossed more than $3 million upon its 1936 Valentine's Day release. Those were enormous numbers in those days. Her relationship with Scott was the most highly applauded aspect of her performance, although her voice, screen presence, and effortless charisma were the main draws for audiences. The show features Irving Berlin's music, which includes his iconic hit, Let's Face the Music and Dance. Hollywood began to take notice of her after this picture. Her role has expanded beyond that of a singer. At last, she had achieved movie stardom. Once again, Harriet's career changed direction in the early 1940s, when World War II was in full swing. She was the ideal fit for Hollywood's thirst for upbeat musicals, comedies, and feel-good storylines. She had a series of roles in wartime comedies from 1941 to 1944. Her character, a college student attempting to use a musical to rescue her institution, was performed by her in Sweetheart of the Campus. She demonstrated her ability to write both songs and suspense in her debut mystery, Confessions of Boston Blackie. She confidently played leading roles in films such as Honeymoon Lodge and Jukebox Jenny. Even for famous people, she often had a number of tasks going at once. When she was on set, the directors adored her. Producers kept bringing her back for more roles because audiences had faith in her. She had accumulated almost a dozen cinematic credits by the middle of the 1940s. She co-starred with Fred MacMurray in the 1938 comedy Coconut Grove, which was about a band that was attempting to break out in the Hollywood music scene. She portrayed a voice coach who became an integral part of the band and whose contribution was crucial to their success. Audiences adored the picture despite its lack of critical acclaim. Both Honeymoon Lodge and Jukebox, Jenny threw her singing career into a frenzy of comic mayhem. In an unusual pairing for a romantic comedy alongside AZ. Swingtime Johnny and High Good Looking were other parts that gave her resume more variation. She frequently performed comedic sketches, musical numbers, and romantic duets. In the midst of America's darkest hour, her name became practically a byword for uplifting film. Hollywood insiders were keeping a careful eye on things behind the scenes. She was viewed by them as more than just a trustworthy celebrity. She possessed the possibility of becoming a legend. She was beautiful, talented, and most importantly, she could make audiences relate to her on screen. It was Ginger Rogers, Fred MacMurray, and Fred Astaire. With the finest, she had shared scenes and held her own. She was supposedly on the verge of becoming a famous celebrity as her reputation soared. My Life with Harriet, an autobiography written by A.Z. Nelson in 1954, exposed a fact that was seldom known back then. He genuinely hoped that she would continue performing, and so did Harriet. A woman was not shoved aside in this instance. A career in film was something Harriet aspired to. She was gifted. There was forward motion in her. The couple still made a pact to prioritize their family. A silent sacrifice began with that decision, a mutually painful and seldom spoken one. The world around her continued to progress, though. The actresses she had worked with before were suddenly becoming famous while she stayed at home to raise her children and run the family. Cast members: Judy Garland, Rita Hayworth, Betty Grable. They shot to fame. Observing from the sidelines, Harriet couldn't help but worry what could. Once were. Knowing she might have been there with them, because to her charisma and talent, was a bittersweet sensation, she said afterwards. Her PTA meetings took precedence over the premiere nights, though. As time went by, that pain, that silent what, persisted. Afterwards, a new twist occurred in 1944. AZ spotted an opportunity to create something fresh when Red Skelton was drafted. He made the radio program The Adventures of AZ and Harriet, which revolved around the family. Its initial airing was on October 8, 1944. Due of the boys' youth, actors initially performed the roles of David and Ricky. However, the actual children eventually took over. This was no ordinary radio program. A family ran the company. The show aired 402 episodes with the help of advertisers including Listerine and Heinz. There was reached homes all around the United States and provided Harriet a new type of platform. They were all set up for television by 1952. ABC exercised their option to air the show on television, as it was already part of their contract. Historic events ensued. One of the longest-running live-action family comedies of all time was The Adventures of AZ and Harriet. From 1952 until 1966, it aired for a total of 14 years. In real time, viewers could observe the growth of David and Ricky. The lads' wedding was even witnessed by them. Indeed, their actual spouses also became cast members. The show's lack of viewership was understandable given its purpose. Its longevity was due to its reliability, friendliness, and the audience's ability to believe that what they were seeing on film was actually happening. AZ even went to greater lengths to bolster that deception. With their set that faithfully replicates the real house at 1822 Camino Pauro Street. The opening titles featured a shot of the actual house's exterior. The soundstage-built interior complemented their home's early American style. Even in the process of designing the set, Harriet made sure it had a recognizable vibe. The audience felt as though they were physically present. It was memorable, private, and reassuring. The show's peak week-to-week viewership was 20 million. Once a promising film actress, Harriet Nelson was now the embodiment of the ideal suburban mother. Graceful, composed, and unflappable. Millions of people thought that was her true identity. But behind the scenes, Harriet's life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. She would first light up at 6 in the morning. Get dinner prepared by the housekeeper before you go to the studio at 7 o'clock. Nonetheless, she maintained the portrayal. Many viewers and critics saw the show as a reflection of the American dream gone wrong. It was painless and accurate to the post-war American standard, spotless. Among the three dominions of 1950s television moms, Harriet eventually rose to prominence. Harriet Nelson was a paragon of excellence, right up there with Barbara Billingsley of Leave It to Beaver and Jane Wyatt of Father Knows Best. However, she was not acting like everyone else. In reality, she was just acting. That is the key to its strength and its limitations. Over time, her television character overshadowed her true self and her history as an actor and singer. American perceptions about Harriet Nelson were inaccurate. The real Harriet was significantly different from the ideal TV mother that most people viewed her as, smiling and subtly serving coffee scene after scene. Peter Jones, who won an Emmy for directing, described her as a bombshell. Because of her vitality and beauty alone. She was outspoken and friendly, but she also appreciated those who didn't conform to the narrow norms of her time. Gay people were praised by Jones. That was unusual, particularly during the 1950s. There was a total lack of representation for the LGBTQ+ community on television. It was not the case for Harriet. Although she kept everything under wraps, she secretly loved them. That one thing revealed more about her character than any number of scripts could have. However, it continued beyond that. Cardigans and cautious smiles weren't Harriet's only traits. Jones claims that she enjoyed making crude jokes, the kind that would have been unheard of on network TV in those days. Plus, she preferred cocktails over wine in the evenings. Harriet was like that when no one was looking. Knowing her background made it all make sense. She began her performing career in vaudeville at the tender age of 3 and never looked back. Anarchy, mirth, and outcasts abound in that universe. Before she ever set foot on a set of a sitcom, she was a part of it. Her performing career had already taken off by the time she crossed paths with A.Z. Nelson in 1932. She didn't simply become a housewife after her 1935 marriage. She took her time adjusting. The show's plot required her to perform the part. However, her outspoken, humorous woman who had never shied away from taking risks. Those closest to her were aware of the truth even when she was portraying the perfect suburban mother on television. Even off camera, she maintained her snark and sharpness. Harriet had a long career as a Broadway dancer, performing with legends like Burt L. and Ken Murray before the advent of filming. Roy Sedley, a comedian, was her spouse in 1930, but they divorced 3 years later. Decisions that were difficult for her were nothing new. She put her solo career on hold when she joined A.Z.'s band. Though she didn't feel obligated to, she did it because it bolstered their performance. Her character, though, remained unchanged. In the end, it was concealed beneath the curtain. Little did anyone know that Harriet had acting chops. For more than 10 years, she fooled everyone into thinking she was someone else. At that point, the tide turned. On June 3, 1975, A.Z. passed away as a result of liver cancer. In years, he had lived to 69. Harriet lost more than just her spouse when he passed away. A lull in her life's tempo slipped away. Even if the show had concluded a long time ago, A.Z.'s presence kept everything cohesive. Harriet isolated herself after his death. Events were no longer attended by her. Interviews were declined by her. According to her friends, she had changed. She remained at home, in solitude, bereaved. Michael Carroll, who is writing a biography of her, claims that she never quite recovered from her. Regret remained as the years passed. It only got worse. Her son David Nelson was asked how his mother was doing in the early 1990s, many years later. The question was not sidestepped by him. He was quite direct. After her father passed away, she became very depressed. It had been almost 2 decades since A.Z. had passed away, and yet, resilience had eluded her. In his professional capacity, David had taken over from his father, yet not even he could console her. By that point, Harriet had stopped entertaining guests and smiling for the cameras. Never once did she leave her home. A 1992 story in the Los Angeles Times states that she had a small circle of close pals. She had transformed into someone quite unrecognizable from the joyful American mother she had once been. Tragic events continued right when it seems like things couldn't get worse. Ricky, her youngest son, was killed in an airplane crash near Dallas, Texas, on December 31, 1985. His age was only 45. Ricky was once a famous musician, a fan favorite, and a teen idol. Devastated was Harriet. AZ was already out of her reach. It was unbearable to lose Ricky. The collision had been unexpected, as well as aggressive. Word got around quickly. Even more introverted than before, Harriet drew within. The accident was not discussed in public by her. Neither did she appear on television. Interviews were not given by her. Those closest to her described her as devastated. Nothing else could be said by her. But Harriet's demise was more than simply an emotional one. Her health has been deteriorating for some time because to her other secret. She began smoking at the tender age of 13. It was little known. Her secret was kept. The ideal mother would never do such a thing. Unfortunately, the pattern persisted. She became exhausted from it over time. Eventually, it caused emphysema. Lung capacity diminished. A difficult time breathing ensued. Walking was an issue for her. She remained inside. The once famous vaudeville dancer was gasping for air. And she continued to smoke discreetly even after that. Her condition had progressed to an intolerable point by the 1990s. In her last years, she resided at her family's Laguna Beach house. Life, music, laughter, and social gatherings were once abundant there. At this point, nothing except Harriet, the water, and her recollections remained. The expansive views and cozy light of the house were insufficient to dispel the eerie stillness. Witnesses said she looked nothing like the lively woman she always was. She rarely cracked a smile. She was somewhat reserved. Her preference was to be alone. She had taken refuge in the home that had once represented love and prosperity. After a peaceful passing on October 16, Harriet Nelson was 94 years old. There was an 85-year-old woman. The reason for this was congestive heart failure, a medical disease that hinders the heart's ability to pump blood effectively. It's a symptom that the body is getting fatigued, and it's prevalent in the elderly. There was nothing dramatic or terrible about Harriet's death. She passed away peacefully at her Laguna Beach house while she slept, a haven from the bright lights of Hollywood. She had been a movie actress for many years, but her role as the reassuring mom on In the Adventures of AZ and Harriet, both she and the show's 1966 finale lingered in viewers' minds. The New York Times and the Los Angeles Times both hailed her as the perfect television mother when word of her passing spread. They had a point. Hers was a peaceful ending to a life that was too often shrouded in scandal or mayhem for celebrities. Get some rest, no drama. Who was there added an extra layer of emotion to the situation. David, her son, was present as well. He was more than just a co-star. He was also a friend and a connection to her history. During Harriet's final moments, David sat by her side. He took her hand. There was a brief silence that spoke a great deal. They hadn't formed a bond for the sake of the cameras. It was nothing new. When I was younger. Unfortunately, in 1985, Ricky, David's younger brother, died in a plane crash, leaving his family devastated. Additionally, Harriet's spouse and companion AZ passed away in 1975. David was the last survivor by 1994. And he made sure his mom wasn't dying all by herself. She was not in a medical facility. There weren't any strangers around her. She was in the company of someone who cared for her at home. You may learn more about the Nelsons from that one piece of information than from any television program. Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood is where Harriet was laid to rest after she passed away. Mountain ranges. No ordinary graveyard, it was. Resting there are members of Hollywood's elite. Those who are fond of Walt Disney, Lucille Ball and B.U. Davis. However, the most significant individuals for Harriet were those who lived closer to her home. Beside AZ and Ricky, she was laid to rest. They got back together. The Nelsons remained a unit even after the patriarch passed away. For those who appreciate vintage television, their cemetery has become a serene landmark. Many come to pay their respects, leave floral offerings, and reflect on a bygone era of celebrity. One that was homey, comforting, and bursting with life. The two have been side by side, silent, but ever-present in American living rooms since the day they first appeared. Location where the tales told in Hollywood films are eternal.